The Callahan family had always cherished their summer traditions, and nothing delighted them more than a day trip to Ravenwood Forest. Nestled in the outskirts of the sleepy town of Elmridge, the forest was known for its towering oaks, cool shaded trails, and tranquil riverbanks. That particular Saturday, the skies were clear, the breeze was gentle, and the entire family was in high spirits, with sandwiches packed, cold lemonade chilling in a cooler, and a checkered picnic blanket ready to be laid out near their favorite spot. It was shaping up to be the perfect day. No one could have predicted that before sunset, their world would be turned upside down forever. Lily, the older sister at 9, was the adventurous type, curious, bold, and always looking to explore beyond what she was told. Emma, only 6, was more reserved, preferring to stick close to her sister. The two girls played a game of hide-and-seek among the moss-covered rocks and hollowed stumps while their parents unpacked lunch by the river just 20 yards away. Every few minutes, the girls would giggle loudly, their laughter echoing between the trees, reassuring their parents they were close. Birds chirped above, and the river trickled lazily. It was a scene so calm, so ordinary, that danger felt like a distant concept. But somewhere in the space between one giggle and the next, the forest fell silent. When their mother called out that lunch was ready, only the rustling of leaves responded. Thinking the girls were playing a prank, the parents laughed at first, calling out again louder this time. When no one replied, they began searching the nearby area, expecting to find two mischievous girls hiding behind a bush or crouched inside a tree trunk. Instead, they found nothing. No footprints, no broken twigs, not even a sound. The laughter had stopped, and with it, so did the sense of safety. As panic set in, the parents began shouting their daughters' names louder, voices cracking with fear. They scoured the clearing, venturing deeper into the woods than they ever had. The picnic lunch was left untouched, ants swarming around the dropped cups of lemonade the girls had left behind. A pink ribbon from Emma's hair lay tangled in the grass near the edge of a shallow ravine, but there was no sign of struggle. Nothing was torn or bloodied. It was as if the girls had been erased from the landscape in a single breath, leaving behind only silence and questions. By evening, forest rangers and local police had swarmed the area. Dogs were brought in, volunteers formed human chains to sweep the woods, and helicopters hovered overhead, scanning the thick canopy. But not a trace of Lily or Emma was ever found. The serene Ravenwood Forest, once a favorite family retreat, had turned into a place of dread. The question everyone asked but no one could answer was, how could two young girls vanish so completely, so quietly, in broad daylight, with no one seeing a thing? The disappearance of Lily and Emma Callahan didn't just break a family, it shattered an entire town. Elmridge had always been the kind of place where doors were left unlocked. Kids rode bikes till dusk, and everyone knew everyone's story. But after that haunting day in Ravenwood Forest, the town's warmth turned to something colder. Whispers replaced greetings, and fear replaced routine. The once thriving community began to retreat into itself, as if the very spirit of the town had been swallowed by the forest that took the girls. Local businesses saw fewer customers. Parents pulled their children from after-school programs, opting instead to keep them indoors. The playground that once echoed with laughter now sat abandoned, the rusting swings creaking eerily in the wind. At night, blinds were drawn tighter than ever before, and any noise beyond the fences sent pulses racing. Ravenwood Forest, once a beloved family destination, was rebranded in hushed tones, the place where the Callahan girls disappeared. No one dared go near it. Even seasoned hikers stopped showing up. The forest, in the minds of many, had become cursed. The Callahan family tried to hold on for the first few months, organizing searches, pleading with media, begging anyone with information to come forward. But as days turned into weeks and then months, hope decayed into hollow silence. The emotional toll became visible. Mr. Callahan was seen walking the edge of the woods alone at sunrise, muttering his daughter's names under his breath. Mrs. Callahan stopped speaking altogether in public. Eventually, unable to face the pitying eyes of neighbors or the weight of their empty home, the couple sold their house and left town in the middle of the night. No goodbye, no forwarding address. Just a cold, empty house with toys still neatly placed on shelves. Still, each year on July 19th, the day the girls vanished, a few townsfolk would return to the spot near the Whispering Oak to leave flowers, toys, and letters. Candles were lit under the branches where the sisters were last seen, and local church bells rang twice for the girls. But even these tributes grew quieter over time, as grief mutated into something darker. Fear. Rumors began to circulate. Some claimed to hear whispers in the woods at night, others said the oak tree seemed to groan on stormy evenings, and a few even swore they saw two figures darting between trees, always just out of reach. The police kept the case open but treated it as a tragic cold case. No evidence, no suspects, and no trace. Still, locals could never shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that someone or something had taken the girls. Whether it was a person hiding in the woods or something ancient buried beneath them, no one could say for certain. What they did know was this: the forest had changed, and so had Elmridge. A shadow had been cast over both, and even after 11 years, it refused to lift. Years passed with no breakthroughs, and the story of the missing Callahan sisters faded into urban legend until the arrival of Simon Vex, a soft-spoken yet determined man with a peculiar obsession for unsolved mysteries. He wasn't a detective or a journalist. Simon was a self-proclaimed treasure hunter, someone who spent his life decoding old maps, uncovering forgotten trails, and chasing stories others gave up on. When he first heard about the Ravenwood disappearance on an obscure internet forum, he became consumed by it. Something about the way the girls vanished without a sound gnawed at his instincts. There were too many gaps, too much quiet. It didn't feel random, it felt deliberate. What caught Simon's attention most wasn't the disappearance itself, but a recurring detail mentioned in early witness interviews: the Whispering Oak. Locals had casually referred to it in passing, an unusually large and twisted tree near the Callahan's picnic site. But deeper digging revealed folklore dating back over a century. Tales spoke of the tree guarding secrets and warning travelers with its creaks. Some even claimed it once marked the burial site of something sacred or cursed. These stories had always been brushed off as old superstition, but Simon believed every legend had a root in truth. He marked it as a point of interest and traveled to Elmridge with nothing more than a metal detector, a digital recorder, and the belief that something had been missed. Upon reaching Ravenwood Forest, Simon was struck by how untouched and eerie the landscape remained. Despite its proximity to town, the forest was quiet, and naturally so. The trails were overgrown, as if nature had reclaimed them. Birds rarely sang. It was as though the place remembered what had happened and wanted no part of it. Guided by old police maps and GPS coordinates from news archives, Simon located the twin oaks where the girls were last seen. One of them stood taller, with a dark hollow that stretched halfway up its trunk, the infamous Whispering Oak. Its bark was covered in thick moss. But Simon noticed something peculiar etched into the side: a small spiral pattern surrounded by tiny vertical slashes. It didn't match any ranger markings or survey symbols. Simon began scanning the area with his detector, expecting the usual bottle caps or scraps of iron, but what he found stunned him. Beneath a thin layer of dirt near the base of the oak, he unearthed a child's rusted hairclip, its plastic butterfly wing still faintly pink. Just a few feet away, he found an old metal button, the kind found on a child's overalls. His pulse quickened. These weren't recent. Time and the elements had almost claimed them. Yet the fact they were buried just beneath the surface, that felt intentional. Simon wondered if someone had wanted these clues hidden, but not gone. His curiosity deepened into unease when he noticed something else. The objects seemed to follow a subtle arc, like a crescent shape carved into the forest floor. It wasn't random. Someone had either arranged the items or dropped them in a pattern. The Whispering Oak stood at the very center. Standing before it, Simon pressed his palm to the trunk, half expecting to hear nothing. Instead, when the wind picked up, the hollow of the oak groaned with a low hum, like a whisper caught in wood. Simon stepped back, unsure whether he was imagining it. But something told him he had just touched the edge of something much deeper, something long buried beneath bark, moss, and silence. The more Simon explored the area around the Whispering Oak, the more disturbed he became by the pattern of items he was uncovering. Each object seemed to whisper part of a story frozen in time. He marked the positions of the findings in his notebook, creating a crude sketch of their placement. It was then, while kneeling beside the last item, a tiny rusted toy ring, his metal detector emitted a different tone, lower and more sustained. Intrigued, Simon dug carefully with his hands, peeling away layers of old soil, dead leaves, and tangled roots. His fingers struck something soft, cloth-like. At first, he thought it was a rag, but as he pulled it out, he realized it was much more. It was an old, decayed canvas, folded tightly and wrapped in twine. Age had stiffened it, and parts were caked with mud. Simon carefully unrolled it, using his water bottle to rinse away the grime. Slowly, an image began to emerge, ink markings, faint and weathered, drawn by an unsteady hand. It wasn't a map of the town or the forest trails. No, this map showed something else entirely. An underground system. Jagged tunnels snaked beneath the forest floor, intersecting in strange patterns. One tunnel was marked with a bold X near, a jagged symbol right beneath the whispering oak. Near the corner of the canvas, 2 names had been scrawled in large, uneven handwriting, faded, but unmistakable. Lily plus Emma. Simon's breath caught in his throat. The handwriting was childlike, clumsy and rushed, possibly written in fear. He scanned the map again and realized the paths weren't random. The girls, or someone guiding them, had drawn this with intent. But how had a child created such an intricate drawing? Had they been trapped beneath the forest, hiding? Simon knew this wasn't the work of a kid playing pretend. There was desperation in the markings. They weren't just drawing, they were leaving behind a lifeline. A final message for someone, anyone, who might one day find it. That someone was now him. Determined to trace the route from the map to the land above, Simon plotted the tunnels against satellite images of Ravenwood. Most of the underground paths aligned with natural depressions, hollow tree clusters, and unusually soft ground. A particular branch of the tunnel led back to the picnic clearing, while another curled toward a ravine long overgrown with thickets. As Simon traced the lines with his finger, he noticed a section of the forest he hadn't yet explored just southeast of the oak. The ink around that area was smudged, but something had been circled 3 times. It was small, but deliberate, and written just beside it, nearly faded away, were 3 chilling words: "Don't go alone." That night, Simon couldn't sleep. The forest seemed to breathe outside his rented cabin, and the wind carried odd creaks like the trees were groaning under the weight of memory. He spread the canvas map on the floor and stared at it under lamplight, trying to decode any missed messages. There were small shapes drawn along the tunnel lines, boxes, stick figures, and what looked like arrows pointing upward. The more he studied it, the more he realized this wasn't just a map. It was a cry for help. And the path it pointed to seemed to suggest that the story of the Callahan sisters wasn't buried by time after all. It was buried by earth. Someone had gone to great lengths to keep it hidden. Simon woke before dawn, the forest still cloaked in shadow and mist. Clutching the map in one hand and his flashlight in the other, he followed the smudged lines toward the southeastern side of the Whispering Oak. According to the canvas drawing, something was hidden there, a junction, a chamber, a secret. The trees grew denser in this direction, the undergrowth thick with thorny vines and knotted roots. The deeper he ventured, the quieter everything became, as if the very ground was holding its breath. Birds stopped singing. Insects fell silent. Even the wind seemed reluctant to move through the leaves. Then, without warning, Simon's boot struck a hollow patch of ground. He knelt and brushed away the debris. Beneath a thick layer of moss, dead leaves, and years of decaying bark, he uncovered what looked like a metal frame embedded in the earth. It was old, rusted, and nearly fused to the soil around it, a trapdoor, cleverly camouflaged by time and nature. Simon's pulse quickened as he pried at the edges with a crowbar. It took several minutes of scraping and tugging before the door creaked open, releasing a foul, stagnant gust of air. The smell of damp earth, rot, and something unfamiliar, something chemical, rose from below. A narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, stretched into darkness. Carved steps led downward, uneven and wet. With trembling hands, Simon turned on his flashlight and descended, his breath catching in his throat with each cautious step. The tunnel walls were lined with packed dirt and brittle roots, but here and there, he spotted crude carvings, childlike drawings scraped into the soil, smiling faces, trees, a stick figure holding a balloon. But as he went deeper, the images changed. Faces turned into frowns. A large figure loomed over 2 smaller ones. Then came words, scratched letters that read, "Too dark. Too long. No sun." Simon's flashlight flickered briefly, casting warped shadows that made the walls seem alive. He pressed on, heart pounding, wondering just how far this tunnel went and who had once called it home. At the bottom of the tunnel, Simon found a small chamber carved out of stone and clay. It was barely tall enough to stand in, and the air was thick and stale. In the corner lay remnants of what had once been blankets, now just shredded fabric and crumbling foam. Nearby, a broken music box sat half open, its distorted melody frozen mid-note. A dented metal lunchbox contained yellowed papers, broken crayons, and a handful of pebbles painted with tiny smiley faces. Everything was coated in a layer of dust, as if frozen in time. But what struck Simon most was the sense of absence. Someone or someone's had lived here, and they had left in a hurry. Just as Simon turned to leave, his flashlight caught something in the dirt wall, an indentation, almost like a handprint. Above it was a final drawing. 2 stick figures standing beneath a tree. One had a red ribbon drawn around the head. The other held what looked like a small map. Simon leaned closer, and his breath caught when he noticed a faint trail of red crayon, maybe leading away from the chamber deeper into another tunnel. There was more. The map hadn't shown this extension. The girls, or someone with them, had gone further than the diagram revealed. Whatever had happened here wasn't finished. The darkness hadn't given up its secrets just yet. Simon hesitated. Before stepping into the new tunnel, it wasn't marked on the map and hadn't been disturbed in years. The air here was colder, more suffocating. He crouched low and followed the red crayon trail drawn faintly along the dirt wall like a breadcrumb path. Every few steps, he found new symbols, a handprint, a crude drawing of a clock, a word scratched over and over. Hide. The silence in this tunnel was different. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It felt like the walls themselves were listening, watching. The only sound was Simon's breathing and the soft crunch of dirt beneath his boots. Then he found the journal. It was tucked into a hollowed-out crevice in the wall, sealed in a cracked plastic bag. The cover was made from thick paper folded over itself and tied with a strip of fabric. Inside were dozens of entries written in childlike handwriting, spelling mistakes, reversed letters, and smudged ink. The earliest entries were innocent. We made a bed today. Emma still cries at night. We heard water. But the tone shifted quickly. Later, pages spoke of hunger, cold, and someone or something watching from the tunnel entrance. One entry read, "He brings food but doesn't talk." Another said, "Emma has to stay quiet when he comes. I pretend to be asleep." Simon's stomach turned. The pages hinted at captivity, at a presence who lurked nearby, but never revealed himself fully. The last few entries were short, frantic, and increasingly disjointed. Scribbled words in red crayon ran over the edges of the page, as if written in a hurry. We heard footsteps again. Not Mommy, not Daddy. The tall man is coming back. Emma says we need to go deeper. No more sun. No more light. Only the tunnel. Simon stared at the words for several minutes, his heart pounding. The writing style clearly aged as the pages progressed. This wasn't scribbled in one sitting. It told a timeline, a transformation. It painted a chilling portrait of 2 little girls who had adapted to the darkness, learned to survive it. But survive what? And where had they gone? Simon turned off his flashlight for a moment, and stood in total blackness, listening. That's when he heard a faint sound, distant and rhythmic, like a soft scraping or breathing. He froze, unsure whether it was real or his imagination. But then it came again, louder, closer. He switched the light back on and turned toward the tunnel he came from. It was empty, but something about it felt wrong. The air seemed thicker now, heavier. He could feel pressure on his chest, as if something was coiling around him from the dark. Fighting panic. Simon carefully backed out of the chamber and sealed the journal in his backpack. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he knew if he left now, he might never return. He took one final look at the trail of crayon that continued into the deeper tunnel, untouched, unread, unexplored. There were answers still buried in the darkness, truths no one else had been willing to dig up, and Simon, trembling in the stale air of a forgotten underground prison, realized something bone deep. He wasn't just chasing a mystery anymore. He was walking through the memories of 2 little girls who had never truly left Ravenwood, after escaping the underground passage with the journal and map secured in his pack. Simon emerged into the forest just as dusk settled over the trees. The whispering of wind through the leaves now felt different, less like nature and more like a warning. He didn't stop to rest. He drove straight to the Elmridge sheriff's office, adrenaline pushing him forward. When he placed the journal, the canvas map, and the rusted items on the table, the skeptical looks he received quickly turned to grim silence. For the first time in over a decade, there was physical evidence tied directly to the missing Callahan sisters, evidence that had been beneath the forest floor, hiding in plain sight all along. Forensics teams descended on Ravenwood the next morning, tracing Simon's exact route, verifying the underground chamber's existence, and examining the disturbing drawings. The tunnel system was deeper than anyone expected, carved intentionally, with areas reinforced by wooden beams, old tools, and wire mesh. Soil samples dated back more than 20 years. But what shocked investigators most wasn't just the elaborate hiding place, it was the fingerprints found on the music box and the crayon journal fingerprints that, when run through the outdated case files, matched those of a man who had been interviewed in the early days of the investigation, Walter Deering, a former groundskeeper who had worked in Ravenwood Forest at the time of the disappearance. Deering had seemed cooperative, back then quiet, reserved, but harmless. He had no record, and when questioned, he claimed to know nothing, offering a vague alibi about being off duty the day the girls vanished. Weeks later, he quit his job and left town. Police didn't follow up, there was no cause, no evidence linking him. But now, over a decade later, his fingerprints resurfaced. A background check revealed he had legally changed his name to years after the girls went missing and moved across state lines. He had lived alone in a remote cabin until his reported death in a car accident 3 years prior. The discovery hit local authorities like a punch to the chest. Had they been speaking to the girl's captor all along? Simon sat silently in the corner of the sheriff's office as this information was revealed. A slow, burning realization crept through him. Deering had built that underground shelter possibly even before the girls went missing. The tunnels had been planned, the trapdoor hidden too well to be the result of a hasty abduction. This was premeditated. What haunted Simon most was the timeline. How long had the girls survived down there before something changed? Days? Weeks? Longer? Had someone brought them food? Had they escaped deeper into the maze beneath the forest? The answers were smeared in dirt, scratched into the walls of a tunnel, and hinted at in red crayon. But just as the authorities believed the puzzle had reached its final piece, another twist unraveled it further. Near the base of a smaller oak, just 50 feet from the Whispering Oak, a second entrance was discovered completely caved in. Dogs sniffed something beneath. An excavation began immediately. No bodies were found. No bones. Just more drawings, stick figures, tunnels, and one final chilling message scribbled on a fragment of wood. "We'll come out when it's safe." It was written in the same childlike handwriting, preserved beneath layers of dirt, untouched by time. For the townsfolk of Elmridge, this wasn't closure. It was a question that echoed louder than ever. Had the sisters ever truly left Ravenwood? To this day, the question of what really happened to Lily and Emma Callahan remains unanswered. The forest gave back whispers, drawings, and shadows, but not the girls themselves. The underground tunnels have since been sealed off by authorities, yet locals swear that on some nights, when the wind shifts just right, you can still hear faint laughter echoing beneath the trees. The Whispering Oak still stands, twisted and silent, guarding its secrets with ancient patience. Simon Vex never returned to Ravenwood after that final discovery. He vanished from the public eye, refusing interviews and leaving behind nothing but a journal of his own filled with maps, notes, and one sentence underlined 3 times. They were never alone down there. The town of Elmridge tries to move on, but something lingers in the soil. Something watching. Something waiting. Whether the sisters are alive, hidden in the deeper veins of the earth, or long gone with their final message left behind, one truth remains undeniable. Sometimes, the darkest stories don't end with answers, they end with silence.